that?
I'll tell you, that was a 5-man chain stab. Welcome again, one and all, to Hipster's Choice, the series where I take you on a road trip to the most underrated and underappreciated weapons in TF2. In this episode, we're going to cover what could possibly be Spy's weirdest knife, the Spy-cicle. To figure out why it's so weird, let's take a look at it. The Spy-cicle is very unique among Spy's leather knives. While a lot of them are meant to be more multi-purpose and designed to feel good in any situation, the Spy-cicle is much more defensive in single use. While holding the Spy-cicle, if you are lit aflame by a pyro, the Spy-cicle will melt, meaning you can't use it for about 15 seconds, unless you pick up ammo boxes to restore it. However, when the Spy-cicle is melted, you gain a few interesting buffs. You become fireproof for 1 second, meaning that pyro's weapons, aside from his melees and shotguns, will deal 0 damage. You will also become immune to afterburn for a whole 10 seconds, which can and will save your life a lot of the time against the pyro. The only other thing to mention is that any enemy you backstab will turn into ice statues. This is more for show, but it can lead a trail to you at times. All of these buffs are extremely defensive, and that really is the point of the Spy-cicle. It's meant to counter one class, which turns an extremely imbalanced interaction to a slightly more favorable one. A lot of spies who like to use a revolver more than the knife will often equip the Spy-cicle specifically for that defensive utility. During that 1 second of fire immunity and 10 seconds of afterburn immunity, if you're good with your shots, you can send the pyro back to the respawn queue with a few clean revolver shots. Even if you enjoy using your knife over your gun, those defensive buffs aren't to be underestimated in exchange for your ability to backstab for a few seconds. Your choice of revolver is extremely important with the Spy-cicle since you're going to end up using it a lot more, especially on servers with multiple pyros. The Ambassador is great by itself, but I plan to cover it in its own episode. So for the meantime, just know that the ability to get critical headshots is great, especially in a pinch against a confronting enemy. The Diamondback isn't the best revolver to pair with the Spy-cicle, oddly enough, since you're not going to be hitting quite as many backstabs as you would with knives that don't disappear when you're hit by a pyro. The Enforcer likewise isn't very good, just in general, but on a server with a vaccinator pocketed pyro, it can be a real lifesaver to kill him or the medic quicker than they might have expected. I also wouldn't say it's worth using the Electron J, since it has a damage penalty. The glow benefit is good and all, but with the Spy-cicle you're going to be using your gun a lot more than other spies would, and the damage penalty is very good at screwing you in those cases. That leaves my personal favorite choice of spy revolvers, the normal one. Truly, it's just the best at what it's meant to do. Reliable, close-range self-defense against upfront enemies. Especially against pyros, melt your Spy-cicle, get your buffs, then hit them with 3 shots up close, and it's almost always a guaranteed kill. They won't know it hit them. Before I get into playstyles and choice of watch with the Spy-cicle, I want to say that I am far from the best spy in the world. Hell, I'd say I'm one of the worst. It took me a while enough to get decent footage for this video since I kept getting myself into idiotic situations. I'd go invisible in the middle of a gunfight, forget to disguise when running at an engineer nest, and I'm nowhere near good enough to hit the flashy trick stabs that good spies are known for. I just wanted to get that out there before I continue. Now, for invis watches that pair well with the Spy-cicle, I'd rule out the Cloak and Dagger. This watch allows you to stay invisible for as long as you want, but with this weapon, you're not trying to wait to find a moment to strike. You're trying to get in there, get a backstab or 2, then fight your way out with your gun. Waiting for the right moment to strike, only for a single flame particle to hit you and completely take away your ability to, well, strike for several seconds, is quite frustrating. The Cloak and Dagger is a good item, I just don't like it with this knife. I'm also not the hugest fan of the stock invis watch with the Spy-cicle. It's good for getting around, but in the cases where you're already caught out, it's completely useless. The pyro will be able to track you easily, even with the defensive buffs of the Spy-cicle. That leaves us with only one other option, which is my favorite in its slot, the Dead Ringer. This watch will allow you to get even more heavy defensive buffs when it's triggered, which can allow you to get behind the enemy quickly and undetected. Even with the loud decloak sound, I've found lately that people just don't seem to have the game volume turned up even a little bit. Maybe that's just me. Now, let's get into playstyle. I mentioned before that you mainly want to get behind the enemy with your watch of choice, secure a backstab or 2, then fight your way out with your revolver if you need to. This isn't to say that you can't secure massive chain stabs with this knife, it's just not likely. Especially without the health buffs of the kunai, the speed of the big armor, or even the rapid disguising of the Your Eternal Reward, your chain stabs will largely be the same as with the stock knife, but with the added benefit that your backstab victims don't have a chance to fly right past your teammates' faces to alert them that you're there. They will still scream when you kill them though, so just be wary of that. Hell, you still be getting clipped. Another detail to mention is that your Spy-cicle won't melt unless you take it out. If you're lit aflame while you're holding your gun and your Spy-cicle is available, you can switch the Spy-cicle to immediately melt it and get your defensive buffs before killing your attacker. I've found this aspect of the weapon to be really helpful. Don't let pyros know that you have the Spy-cicle until they start attacking you. A lot of pyros won't switch to the shotgun until you're out of the range of their flamethrower, which gives you ample time to melt your Spy-cicle and gun them down. You do play a lot like stock Spy with the Spy-cicle, but with those defensive buffs in your pocket you can get in exchange for your knife temporarily. It's a very simple mechanic that doesn't require you to backstab the pyro in order to cure the afterburn like the kunai does. That isn't to say that this weapon is an immediate counter to pyros, not at all. It's a great way to get defensive utility against them, but you are still giving up your class's main functionality in order to get those buffs. The fireproofing only lasts a second, and after that they still do as much damage as they normally would to you, just without the afterburn. In those scenarios, you are relying on your revolver in order to kill them. It's a very interesting interaction that I don't see enough people taking advantage of, quite frankly. Now, what happens if you aren't confident in your revolver shots or your backstab ability? Well, then I don't know what to tell you. At that point, I think it's time to switch classes or practice more at Spy. I know he's seen by the TF2 community as the weakest class, and I guess to an extent he is, but with the amount of unkillable Hale's own kunai spies I've seen tear apart my Gibbous Vision team, that should tell you he's still a formidable opponent. Even if he isn't using the kunai for some reason, he still has the potential to wipe out anyone simply by getting behind them. The same can be said for the Spy-cicle as well. It's a more defensive weapon, but the buffs it provides against pyros can't be undersold. Now, this entire time I've been talking about the buffs it provides against pyros, but sometimes you'll go into a lobby and there won't be a pyro. What do you do then? Well, it's simple. It doesn't matter, really. Just use whatever knife you want. If the Spy-cicle is your favorite because of the way it looks or the ice statues, then keep using it. You never know if someone will switch to pyro because of your presence. If that is the case, you can keep using your Spy-cicle and use it for its intended use. Provide those defensive buffs against those pyros. But why would you want to use the Spy-cicle over other knives, especially the kunai? I'll tell you a few reasons. Variety is the main one. A lot of spies who play nowadays, especially spy mains, will just stick to using the kunai constantly, and to be honest, I can't say I blame them. It's an amazing weapon. However, the Spy-cicle provides a playstyle that I don't think enough people are talking about. I've always enjoyed being the person to shoot my opponent rather than stabbing them, or in my case, because my internet is literally too good for me to be playing Spy, lightly tickling them with my icicle. Gun Spy is the legitimate strategy. The revolver does amazing damage even at ranges you wouldn't think it does. As I mentioned before, you can pair any revolver with this knife and it'll do great. You don't get that choice with the kunai since your health is so low and you have the constant threat of draining overheal as long as you don't get any backstabs. You either use an Electron J or the Ambassador with the kunai depending on how good you feel about your ability to do such backstabs. All in all, I'd say the reason to use the Spy-cicle over other knives is for the fun of it. You can get into a lot more interesting situations playing with your revolver than just going through the motions and trick stabbing anyone. I'd recommend any good spy to give this sort of playstyle a go and see how they like it. And with that, I think that about does it for the Spy-cicle. A very interesting knife, but one of my personal favorites to mess around with. The situations you can get into using this knife are still some of my favorites, and it turns one of my least favorite interactions into a very interesting one on both the pyros and the spy's end. The pyro can switch to his shotgun to ignore the buffs of the spy, and the spy has to rely on the aim of his revolver in order to get rid of his attacker. So go and show the pyros who think they can kill any spy by holding down mouse 1 and spinning around rapidly, and have a good one. Oh, and for some reason you can festivize this weapon, even though it's literally just an icicle, so yeah.